Hello, and thank you for joining us for another edition of HaloLife. This is a special edition of joint venture of the HaloLife podcast with angelsnation.com, where we are going to discuss our experiences on the 60th anniversary of the Angels, about the first 30 years of that franchise history, and a beautiful place out in the desert of California, a town called Palm Springs.
Oh, yeah.
This is a place where the Angels spent their first 30 years of their history, and me and Stu both have talked about this place since we started doing the 60th on 60 podcast series, and it just seems so natural to give this some attention as we're celebrating the entire history of the Angels. Stu, I want to thank you for inviting me to contribute to what you're doing at angelsnation.com with a series of stories covering the Palm Springs experience. Why don't we start there? Why don't you just tell us what you have going on over at angelsnation.com on the 60th anniversary with regards to Palm Springs and Angels?
Well, sure. I got a, first of all, tip of the I got to give you a tip of the halo, because to be honest, this was your idea. You and I kind of talked about partnership, about your podcast partnering with the website that I'm a managing editor of, and you had a beautifully written story about your memories of your spring times going out there as a kid to Palm Springs, and it really kicked me off to the fact that, boy, do I ever have some really great memories. And I think I'll share those with you on another episode, because these can get long-winded, because I've got tons of them. And but yeah, I mean, it's in progress. It'll be published very soon. Your story is going to be published very soon, and it's wonderfully written, by the way. Thank you so much. I can't praise your story enough. And I know that your fans who listen to your podcast will be happy to come over to angelsnation.com and actually read your writing, because it's the entire journalistic bill that you bring to the table. So it's a true partnership what we're doing here, and in my mind, it just expanded. It is 60 years since the club was founded, and I think about this fact that they started training out in Palm Springs 60 years ago, and some of my fondest memories of my life were out there. So I've been interviewing so many people, not just yourself, players, Bobby Knopp, Bobby Gritch. I've got a phone call coming in from Garrett Anderson, Buck Rogers, Albie Pearson, Clyde Wright. You're talking about some of the legends of Angels baseball who will be featured in this series, along with yourself, along with myself, along with my sister, along with legendary press figures like Ross Newhan, who's in the Hall of Fame for his sports writing. Tim Mead, the longtime Angels Vice President of Communications, and now President of the Baseball Hall of Fame. Ed Munson, who is an official Major League Baseball scorer, who in the 1970s was a gopher for those Angels teams and was going out to Palm Springs in the 70s. It's going to be wonderful, priceless stories, and it's a real special treat. And I think about the times when I used to see Frank Sinatra out there, and this is why I'm going to celebrate with a toast of wine. Spring has been sprung and a wonderful fling to be flung, right? Okay, I can't sing right now. But Sinatra was out there. The big stars were out there. So a little toast of wine to those days, because it's in our memory banks. And I think maybe young kids today don't really know how special it was for us back then. So why don't you let me know about your wonderful stories, which you did so beautifully in writing. Let your listeners know about how it felt.
Yeah, I'll just expand on kind of what I wrote about, because as I started just thinking through my memories of the former Polo Grounds, we knew them as Angel Stadium. That's what it was called before Edison Field and Anaheim Stadium took on that name. The original Angel Stadium was there at Palm Springs. If you're looking for it on the map, it's between 4 cross streets in a park. And it's called
Right.
Sunrise Park. That it's in the middle of off East Baristo, South Pavilion Way, Ramon Road, and South Sunrise. Those are the four streets that make up that block. And the stadium itself was pretty basic. I mean, it was a small, intimate feeling. The backstop kind of curved around and covered just about to the dugouts, a little beyond the dugouts. So that was all you had as far as a formal structure for the stadium. And then you had the aluminum seats that kind of went down the foul line just beyond like the infield. It was probably, short outfield where they stopped. It didn't even go all the way out to the wall. So it was real intimate. And one of my memories, I mean, I think
for the kids who haven't,
I'm sorry, Stu, go ahead.
Well, for the kids who haven't been out there, it was kind of like a glorified high school field. I mean, if any kids around nowadays have ever been out to Blair Field in Long Beach, I would say that Blair Field today is probably a better complex than that was. It was really an actual humble place where we saw major leaguers.
Yeah, it was more humble than Blair Field or Goodwin Field at Fullerton. Those are more like spring training facilities to me, like to the modern spring training facilities. Yeah, it was more like like a small college, even like a high school type setting there. And as I was writing the story, I think some of the stories as I started writing this stuff down, it probably seems, and it may to the reader even seem unbelievable, the kind of experience that you had, the kind of the folks that you came in contact with. But I have to say, even growing up within 30 minutes of Anaheim Stadium and going to, at least 40 regular season games on average, probably a year, that my fandom really like was solidified in those weekends at Palm Springs. And I'll say it for one couple reasons. One, it really became a family venture. Mom came out for those, it was more the whole family. It wasn't just Dad and me, and the grandparents would come. I had one set of grandparents that live up in the valley, and another set of grandparents lived in upstate New York. Well, they'd come out on vacation. We'd all go out there, and yeah, you had this experience. And the one thing you mentioned about the field and the stadium, the bleachers, the batting cages were right behind the first baseline in the there. And I didn't even mention in my article, one of the things I remember, I got one of the highlights of my early fandom was in 1982 when Reginald Martinez Jackson was signed by Gene Autry. And I remember distinctly that this is the kind of access you had. Like he was in the batting cage. I think it was like Bobby Knopp or Bob Clear or someone, one of the coaches is throwing BP to him. And I mean, literally, I was standing outside the netting, and I was like looking right at Reggie Jackson, like less than 6-7 feet from him, as he was behind the netting taking BP and cursing up a storm, as he wasn't pleased with however he was hitting the ball that day. But these, I was a young and 11-year-old, just like really looking up to the Mr. October. This guy was a celebrity beyond sports.
Yeah.
And you had that kind of access. He came right out of the cage. I think he signed my media guide. I've got a slew of autographs in my collection in the vaults here. But
wonderful.
But yeah, wonderful. I mean, you had that access to players. And then as an autograph seeker as a kid, right now I know in Tempe, the way the layout is, you may be lucky enough during the game to be down the right field line as the players start walking out and getting an autograph, or as they're leaving the practice fields and walking past the metal gates, they might stop and sign your autograph. That's like your access there.
Mm-hmm.
Palm Springs, the players didn't have a private lot. There were parking lots throughout Sunrise Park, somewhere down on the south side off Sunrise, somewhere over on the north side off Burita, but they all were just like normal parking lots, not gated. And the players had one way to leave to get to their cars, and it was right behind the stadium, just like they had
one way in, one way out, baby.
That was it. So as an autograph seeker, I mean, they had to get past you, and most of them were cordial. Some of them were in a hurry. You know, people have plans, whatever. But you would have all kinds of experiences. I remember Doug DeCinces one year. You know, everybody's looking for Doug's autograph, and they've got their pins. I was trying to find a pin. They've got their pins with their with the item they want autographed, and the pins are all like up in the face, you know, like with whatever they're autographing.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then, like, you know, it's hordes of kids, and I remember the sensei saying, guys, just if you could take a step back, you know, look at my arms. And he had like just ballpoint ink all over his arms, but it took him to that point before he actually said something. Good guy. Doug Sensei was great. Reggie, like I said, a lot of times you would have a hard time as a seeker getting Reggie's autograph. Sometimes you'd be in a hurry and bolt. But one thing that stuck out, and I put in the story, was on one particular day, right behind the main entrance behind home plate, there was one of those bike racks that was kind of circular, you know, where you slide your bike in there.
Yeah, I remember it.
And I
remember
Reggie started getting hoarded, as you'd imagine, by just all these fans. And he took it upon himself, instead of dodging them and just bolting, he said, here's what I'm going to do, fellas. If you create a straight line, get in a single file line, I'll sit here and sign your autographs. Right. And he sat there, leaned up against that bike rack. And I mean, I got in line. I probably waited 5 minutes, got his autograph, and then was waiting for other players, looking over periodically. It was probably 30 to 40 minutes before Reggie finally signed that last autograph. I mean, the line got down to the last person. He signed the last autograph and went on his way, you know. But just great memories, great times. I mean, I'll never forget. My grandparents aren't here. My dad's no longer here. Just great memories to be able to go back and think about the times that we spent there. One other thing I remember really stood out to me. Paul Molitor. Sometimes you see the opposing players. You got connected with a lot of the Angels, Gary Pettis, Schofield, Lynn. But the one that really a couple memories stuck out. Paul Molitor was with the Brewers. I think it was 83. It was probably the year after the Angels lost to them. And I remember that, you know, the visiting team was on the third base side. And I recall going up to him trying to get his autograph, but it was probably 10 minutes before the game started. And, you know, Mr. Molitor always said, you know, always called him Mr. Show respect. Mr. Molitor, can I have your autograph? And he just looked at me and said, right now it's just too close to the game. I can't do that. But he looked down on the ground and picked up a baseball and tossed it above the fence, which is probably about a 10-foot chain link fence there between the field. And I still have that ball to this day. And this was like his third or fourth year in the majors. You know, I had no idea he was going to be a future Hall of Famer. But yeah, you get to meet Ryan Sandberg and Dawson when the Cubs came to town, Tony Gwynn when the Padres came to town, Robin Yount. And of course you had the Reggies, the Don Suttons, the Rod Carews.
All Hall of Famers.
Yeah, these are all the Hall of Famers I'm mentioning. Yeah. And then one thing I remember is, you know, I always get my baseball cards autographed. My brother was a Cubs fan. He's the oddball. I don't know why, but he became a Cubs fan. And in 1985, the year after the Cubs had that big 84 year, there was a Fleer did a baseball. Yeah. And Fleer did on their card set, had a team photo card for the 1984 National League East champion Cubs. So I had that card, and I was, you know, and Jim Fry was still was a Cubs manager in 84. He was there. So I thought, oh, this would be kind of cool. Get Jim Fry to sign it. And he did. And later, Dallas Green, the general manager for the team, was in the stands that day watching the game. I approached him. He was kind enough to sign it. So I had the GM and the manager sign this. And I don't know if it was before the game. I think it was before the game. I think it was between batting practice and the beginning of the game. Harry Carey walked by and was right there along the first baseline. He must have been doing interviews on the field, and he was going to go up the press box. I got I got a third. I got the trifecta on this card. And I got Harry Carey to sign this card. So I had this card where he signed the back. Unfortunately, I can't display it because it's Harry's signature on the back with Fry and Dallas Green on the front. But just great experience. You'd see those guys. I remember Stu Nahan, Keith Oberman was at Channel 5 at the time. All those guys would just kind of be hanging up behind at the top level, hanging. I remember seeing Oberman and Stu Nahan just kind of hanging out there in the sun, watching these games. It was a very relaxed atmosphere. And Gene Autry was always right there. Gene Autry would be sitting in the bleachers, and he'd always come right out. You had no problem meeting Gene Autry. A lot of, of course, he was legend with all generations of fans that were there. And great time.
His,
one last
place in American history.
Absolutely,
Autry's
absolutely.
Place in American history is secure.
And then my
not just an Angels own.
My one last memory on Palm Springs and opposing that this is a once in a lifetime, and probably if what I've told you already doesn't sound unbelievable, it was probably around 85, 86 again. The Cubs were in town and they were playing the Angels there. And we were out during the game looking for the starters to come out and get their autographs from both dugouts, on the left side or the right side for the visitors or her Angels. And Ernie Banks comes out of the Cubs clubhouse. He's, of course, retired, in the Hall of Fame at this point. And, everybody's looking to get Ernie Banks autograph. I had a baseball that I don't have it with me, but I had a baseball. I probably had a dozen signatures at least on it already. And I wanted to get Ernie Banks on it. So I'm the last guy to approach Banks. And, he realizes that and says, "Here, I'll sign your autograph if you do something for me." And he goes, "Follow me." And, the parking lot to Burrito Road was just up a ways from the that visitors clubhouse. So I followed him, and by then I wasn't alone. There was a couple other kids with me too. He popped open the trunk of his rental sedan, and there's a golf ball, a set of clubs in a Cubs bag. It says Mr. Cub on it. And he asked me, "Can you just do me a favor and help me carry these clubs back to the clubhouse?" So I caddied Mr. Cubs clubs from his sedan back to the Cubs clubhouse, and he signed my ball once I got the clubs to the door. So that's my my brush with greatness in the legend of Ernie Banks. And
what a fantastic memory!
Great people, and I know you worked in the media. You've mentioned your stories where you've gotten to know good people in the clubhouses and stuff. You would be able to find the good people and see the good side or the bad side of these players in Palm Springs, because they really had no choice but to deal with the fans either the right way or try to avoid them altogether.
In Palm Springs, BJ, it was so relaxed. I don't think we ever saw the bad side of a player. But and I've got a notebook full of wonderful memories to share with you. Maybe we'll do that on the next episode here. And I'd love to go through some of my special memories, because it was always a special trip. I'd love that to do my own memories with you. I never was an autograph seeker, but my memory, not many things fall out of it. And I've got some wonderful memories of spring training to share with you too. But I would definitely encourage all Angels fans or all followers of HaloLife podcast to head on over to angelnation.com, because you'll see some of the nicest writing you'll ever want to see from BJ Martin on there. Basically leading off our column series, very important column series about Palm Springs and that experience. We're not talking about Arizona on angelnation.com. We're talking about Palm Springs only. And you wrote an excellent column there, BJ.
Thank you, Stu. Thank you for allowing me to share my memories on this podcast. And I look forward to the next edition where we get into more of your memories and sharing those as well on the HaloLife podcast, but as well to the angelsnation.com fans as well. So appreciate everybody who's joined us for this meeting, this podcast. I look forward to to sharing on the future Palm Springs edition of the podcast. If you like this podcast and you're on YouTube, make sure you like it. If you're listening to the podcast on Anchor, Spotify, or one of the other podcast providers, please share it with your friends, and don't forget, life is precious. Tomorrow's
Definitely.
not promised, and live your life 9 innings at a time. Thank you, Stu, for joining for having me today and for allowing me to share.
Thank you, BJ. That was a real special podcast.